Lots of distance education. My name is Greg Weaver, and this is ENG3E, or 3C, Grade 11 College Prep English. I'd like to welcome everyone listening across New York State at home, your learning center, or on Bell Expressview to call and join our class. You can call 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017 or 2983 in the Sioux Lookout, Lac Seul, or Dryden area. I'd like to welcome everyone back to class today. This class is being broadcast at our normal time and will be rebroadcast tomorrow at the same time, 3 o'clock Central, 4 o'clock Eastern. A reminder to all students that tomorrow's class is being pre-recorded because I will be traveling to Deer Lake and to Keewaywin for community visits tomorrow. I'm going with Bonnie, Barb Matuzik, Candace, and Darren. We're all traveling up together. So class is being canceled and will be rescheduled to today, hence why we have class now. For those students who couldn't join us last hour, the class that we broadcasted yesterday from 2 to 3 is available on our archive, and I will also have that clip posted to YouTube as well. So what we're doing, we are in our last hour, we finished off looking at lesson 9. So what we're going to do now, we're going to look at chapter 10 in our course novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, chapter 10 starts on page 118 in our course novel. You can find that on page 118. And we'll be reading that first. Once we finish looking at chapter 10, we will jump right into lesson number 10. And we will be reading some true crime short stories and then looking at doing the steps necessary for a research report. Now, we did something similar to this at the end of Unit 1. This is going to be a little bit different. We're going to get into and look at. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into chapter 10. So it starts off. Atticus was feeble. He was nearly 50. When Gemini asked him why he was so old, he said he got started late, which we thought reflected upon his abilities and manliness. He was much older than parents of our school contemporaries. There was nothing Jem or I could say about him when our classes said, "My father." Jem was football crazy. Atticus was never too tired to play keep away, but when Jem wanted to talk him, Atticus would say, "I'm too old for that, son." Our father didn't do anything. He worked in an office, not a drugstore. Atticus did not drive a dump truck for the county. He was not the sheriff. He did not farm, work in a garage, or do anything that could possibly arouse the admiration of anyone. Besides, he wore glasses. He was nearly blind in his left eye, and said left eyes were the tribal curse of the Finches. Whenever he wanted to do something well, he turned his head and looked from his right eye. He did not do the things our schoolmates' fathers did. He never went hunting. He didn't play poker or fish or drink or smoke. He sat in the living room and read. With these attributes, however, he would not remain as inconspicuous as he wished. To that year, the school buzzed about the talk of him defending Tom Robinson, none of which was complimentary. After my bout with Cecil Jacobs, when I committed myself to a policy of cowardice, word got around that Scout Finch wouldn't fight anymore. Her daddy wouldn't let her. This was not entirely true. I wouldn't fight publicly for Atticus, but the family was private ground. I'd fight anyone from a third cousin upwards tooth and nail. Francis Hancock, for example, knew that. When he gave us our air rifles, Atticus wouldn't teach us to shoot. Uncle Jack instructed us in the rudiments thereof. He said Atticus wasn't interested in guns. Atticus said to Jem one day, I'd rather you shot at tin cans in the backyard, but I know you'll go after birds. Shoot at all the blue jays you want if you can hit them. But remember, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. Now stop for a second there. You just said it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. Now that is the title of our story, of this novel, is To Kill a Mockingbird. So when you think about why that is, take a few moments to think about that, because this idea, this topic, will come up again in, I believe it's lesson 15, when we start looking at the end of the novel and what happens at the end, and the reasons and the themes and stories behind some of the activities. So keep that in mind. So it is back in, it's in chapter 10. It's the only time you'll ever hear that phrase. Just think about that. So it's the only time ever Atticus say it was a sin to do something. And I asked Miss Mowdy about it. Your father's right, she said. Mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. They don't eat up people's gardens. They don't nest in corn cribs. They don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. And that's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. Miss Mallory, this neighborhood's old, ain't it? Been here longer than the town. No, I mean, the folks in our street are all old. Jim and me are the only children around here. Mrs. Dubose is close to 100. Miss Rachel's old, and as are you and Atticus. I don't call 50 very old. Miss Masterly, not being wheeled about yet, am I? Neither is your father. But my state province was kind enough to burn down the old mausoleum of mine. I'm too old to keep it up. Maybe you're right, Jean Louise. This is a settled neighborhood. You've never been around young folks much, have you? Yes'm. At school. I mean, young grown-ups. You're lucky, you know. You and Jim have the benefit of your father's age. If your father was 30, you'd find life quite different. I'm sure I would. Atticus can't do anything. There's life in him yet. What can he do? He can make somebody's will so airtight that nobody can meddle with it. Shoot. Well, did you know he's the best checker player in this town? Why? Down the line when we were coming up, Atticus Finch could beat anybody on both sides of the river. Good Lord, Miss Marty, Jim and I beat him all the time. It's about time you found it out, because it's what he lets you. Did you know he can play a Jew's harp? This mom's comment served to make me more ashamed of him. Well, she said, what happened, Smouty? Well, nothing. It just seems like all you'd be proud of him. Can already play a Jew's harp. Now keep out of the way of the carpenters. You better go home. I'll bring my Zales. I'll be in my Zales and I can't watch you. Plank might hit you. I went back to the backyard and found Jem plugging away at a tin can, which seemed to be stupid with all the Blue Jays around. I returned to the front yard and busied myself for 2 hours erecting a complicated breastworks on the side of the porch, consisting of a tire and orange crate, the laundry hamper, 2 porch chairs, and a small U.S. flag Jem had given me from a popcorn box. What are you shooting at? Asked him when I asked him to crouching aim across the street. Missed Mouty's rear end. Agus turned and saw my generous target bending over her bushes. He pushed back his hat to the back of his head and crossed the street. Mouty, he called. I thought I better warn you. You're in considerable peril. Miss Mouty straightened up and looked towards you and said, Atticus, you're a devil from hell. When Atticus returned, he told me to break camp. Don't you ever let me catch you pointing that gun at anybody again, he said. Wish my father was a devil from hell. I sound like a pretty out on the subject. Mr. Finch, why, you can do lots of things. Like what? Calpurnia scratched his head. Well, I don't rightly know, she said. Jem underlined it when he asked Agus if he was going out for the Methodist, and Agus said he'd break his neck if he did. He was just too old for that sort of thing. The Methodists were trying to pay off the church mortgage, and had challenged the Baptists to a game of touch football. Everybody in town's father was playing, it seemed, except Atticus. Jem said he didn't really want to go, but he was unable to resist football in any form, and stood gloomily on the sidelines, while Atticus and me watching Cecil Jacobs' father make touchdowns for the Baptists. One Saturday, Jem and I were exploring the air rifles to see if we could find a rabbit or a squirrel. We'd gone about 500 yards beyond the Radley place when I noticed Jem squinting at something down the street. He turned his head to one side and was looking at the corner of his eyes. What are you looking at? That old dog down yonder. That's old Tim Johnson, ain't it? Yeah. Tim Johnson was the property of Mr. Harry Johnson, who drove the mobile bus and lived to the very southern edge of town. Tim was a liver-colored bird dog, the pet of Macomb. What's he doing? I don't know, Scout. We better go home. Jim, it's February. I don't care. I'm going to go tell Cal. Rachel ran to the kitchen. Cal, said Jem, can you come out for your sidewalk for a minute? For what for, Jem? I can't go sidewalk every time you want me. There's something wrong with an old dog down yonder. I can't about any dog's foot now. There's some gauze in the grass. Go and get it and do it yourself. Jem shook his head. He's sick, Cal. Something's wrong with him. What's he trying to do? Catch his tail? No. He's doing it like this. Jem gulped like a goldfish, hunched his shoulders, and twitched his torso. He's going like that. He does what he means to. Are you telling me a story, Jem Finch? Calpurnia's was harder. No, Cal. I swear I'm not. Was it running? No, just moseying along. It was so slow you could hardly tell it, and he's coming this way. Calpurnia raised her arms and followed Jem to the yard. I don't see any dog, she said. She followed us beyond the Radley place and looked where Jem pointed. Tim Johnson was not much more than a speck in the distance, but he was closer to us. He walked erratically, as his right legs were shorter than his left legs. But he reminded me of a car stuck in the sandbed. He's gone lopsided, said Jem. Calpurnia stared, then grabbed us by the shoulders and ran us home. She shut the wood door behind us Went to the telephone and shouted, "Get in Mr. Finch's office." "Mr. Finch," she said, "it's Cal. I swear to God, there's a mad dog down the street a piece. He's coming this way." "Yes, sir. He's Mr. Finch. I swear, it's old Tim Johnson." "Yes, sir." "Yes, sir." "Yes." She hung up and shook her head when he tried to ask her what Agatha had said. She rattled the telephone and said, "Miss Eula now, ma'am. I'm through talking to Mr. Finch. Please don't disconnect me no more. Listen to me, Eula. Can you reach Miss Rachel, Miss Stephanie Crawford, and whoever's got a phone in the street, tell me there's a mad dog coming? Please, ma'am." "I know it's February, Miss Eula, but I also know a mad dog when I see one. Please hurry, ma'am." Ashton, "Does the Riley's got a phone?" Jim looked and bug and said, "No. They won't be coming out anyways, Kyle." "I don't care. I'm going to tell him." She ran to the front porch and Jim and her heels. "You stay in the house," she yelled. First message had been received by a neighbor. Every wood door in our range was closed tight. We saw no trace of Tim Johnson. Welch got pretty running over the Riley place, holding her skirt up above her knees. She ran up the front steps and banged the door. She got no answer. She yelled, "Mr. Nathan, Mr. Arthur, my mad dog's coming. Mad dog's coming." "She's supposed to go in the back," I said. Jim shook his head. "Doesn't make any difference now," he said. Calpurnia pounded on the door in vain. No one acknowledged her warning. No one seemed to have heard it. As Calpurnia sprinted back to the back porch, a black Ford swung to the driveway. Atticus and Mr. Heck Tate got out. Mr. Heck Tate was the sheriff from Macomb County. He was as tall as Atticus, but thinner. He had a long nose, wore boots with shiny metal eye holes, boot pants, and a lumberjacket. His belt had a row of bullets sticking in it. He carried a heavy rifle. When he and Atticus reached the porch, Jim opened the door. "Stay inside, son," said Atticus. "Where is he, Cal?" "He ought to be here by now," said Cumberland, pointing to the street. "Not running, is he?" asked Mr. Tate. "No, sir. He's in the twitching stage, Mr. Heck." "Should we go after him, Heck?" asked Atticus. "We better wait, Mr. Finch. They usually go in a straight line. We can never tell. He might follow the curve. Hope he does, or we'll go straight into the Radley backyard." "Let's wait a minute. Don't think he'll get to the Radley backyard. The fence will stop him. He'll probably follow the road." I thought my dogs foamed at the mouth, galloped, leapt, and lunged at throats. And I thought they did it in August. Had Tim Johnson behaved thus, I would have been less frightened. Nothing is more deadly in a deserted, waiting street. The trees were still, the mockingbirds were silent, the carpenters of Miss Meyer's house had vanished. Heard Mr. Tate sniff, then blow his nose. I saw him shift his gun to the crook of his arm. I saw Miss Stephanie Crawford's face framed in the glass window of her front door. Miss Money appeared and stood beside her. Agus put his foot in the rung of the chair and rubbed his hand slowly down side by side. "There he is," he said softly. Tim Johnson ran to sight, walking dazedly in the inner rim of the curve, parallel to the Radley house. "Look at him, Mr. Jim. Mr. Heck said he'd walk in a straight line. He can't even stay in the road." "He looks more sick than anything," I said. "Let me get in front of him, he'll come straight at it." Or let anything in front of him come straight at it. Mr. Tate put his hand on his forehead and leaned forward. "He's got it all right, Mr. Finch." Tim Johnson was advancing at a snail's pace. He was not playing or sniffing at the foliage. He seemed dedicated to one course and motivated by a sheer invisible force that was inching him towards us. We could see him shiver like a horse shedding fleas. His jaw opened shut. It was a list, but he was being pulled gradually towards us. "He's looking for a place to die," said Jem. Mr. Tate turned around. "He's far from dead, Jem. He hasn't got started yet." Tim Johnson reached the side street that ran in front of the Radley place. What remained of his poor mind made him pause and consider which road he would take. He made a few hesitant steps and stopped in front of the Radley gate. He tried to turn around, but was having difficulty. "He's within range, Heck. You better get him before he goes down the side street." "Lord, no, who's around the corner? Go inside, Cal." Calpurnia opened the screen door, latched it behind her, and unlatched it and held on to the hook. She tried to block me and jump on her body, but we looked out from beneath her arms. "Take him, Mr. Finch." Mr. Tate handed over to Atticus. Jim and I nearly fainted. "Don't waste your time, Heck. Go on." "Mr. Finch, this is a one-shot job." Atticus shook his head vehemently. "Don't just stand there, Heck. He won't wait all day for you." "For God's sake, Mr. Finch, look where he is. Miss, and you'll go straight into the Radley house. I can't shoot that well, and you know it." "I haven't shot a gun in 30 years. Mr. Tate almost threw the rifle at Atticus. "I'd feel mighty comfortable if you did now," he said. In a fog, Jem and I watched our father take the gun and walk out in the middle of the street. He walked quickly, but I thought he moved like an underwater swimmer. Time had slowed to a nauseating crawl. Atticus raised his glasses. Capri remembered, "Sweet Jesus, get help him," and put her hands to her cheeks. Atticus pushed his glasses to his forehead. They slipped down and he dropped them in the street. In the silence, I heard the heard them crack. Atticus rubbed his eyes when he saw him. He saw him blink hard. In front of the Radley gate. Tim Johnson made what's left his mind. He finally turned himself around towards pursue his original course up our street. He made 2 steps and stopped and raised his head. We saw his body go rigid. With movements so swift they seemed simultaneous. Atticus's hand yanked the ball-tip lever as he brought the gun to his shoulder. The rifle cracked. Tim Johnson leapt, flopped over, and crumpled on the sidewalk in a brown and white heap. He didn't know what hit him. Mr. Tate jumped off the porch and ran to the Radley place. He stopped in front of the dog, squatted, turned around, and tapped his finger on his forehead above his left eye. "You're a little to the right, Mr. Finch," he called. "Always was," answered Atticus. "If I had my druthers, I'd take a shotgun." He stooped and picked up his glasses, ground the broken lens to powder under his heels, went to Mr. Tate, and started looking at the road at Tim Johnson. Doors opened one by one. And the neighborhood suddenly came alive. Miss Mowdy walked down the steps with Miss Stephanie Crawford. Jeff was paralyzed. I pinched him to get him moving, but when Atticus saw us coming, he said, "Stay where you are." When Mr. Tate and Atticus returned to the yard, Mr. Tate was smiling. I'll have Zeebo collect them, he said. "You haven't forgotten much, Mr. Finch. They say it never leaves you." Atticus was silent. "Atticus," said Jim. "Yes, nothing." "I saw that one-shot, Finch." Atticus wheeled around his face to Miss Mowdy. They looked at each other without saying anything, and Atticus got into the sheriff's car. "Come here," he said to Jim. "Don't go near that dog, you understand? Don't go near him. He's just as dangerous dead as alive." "Yes, sir." "Atticus, what's the nothing?" "What's wrong with you, boy? Can't you talk?" Mr. Tate grinned at Jim. "Didn't you know your daddy's—" "Hush, hush," said Atticus. "Let's go back to town." When they drove away, Jim and I went to Miss Stephanie's front steps. We sat waiting for Zeebo to arrive in the garbage truck. Jim sat in numb confusion. Miss Stephanie said, Who'd have thought a mad dog in February? Maybe he wasn't mad, maybe he was just crazy. I'd like to see Terry Johnson's face when he gets in from the mobile run and finds Atticus Finch shot his dog. Bet he's full of fleas from somewhere. So I said Miss Stephanie's been singing a different tune if Tim Johnson was still up the street. They'd find it soon enough. They'd send his head to Montgomery. Jim became vague articulate. "Did you see him, Scout? Did you see him just standing there?" All of a sudden, he just relaxed all over, and he was part of him. He did it quick, like have to aim for 10 minutes before he hit something. Miss Mowdy smiled wickedly. "Well, now, Miss Jean Louise, still think your father can't do anything? Still ashamed of him?" "No," I said meekly. "Forgot to tell you the other day that besides playing the juice harp, Atticus Finch was the deadliest shot in Macomb County in his time." "Dead shot," echoed Jim. "That's why I said, Jim Finch. I guess you change your tune now. The very idea you didn't know his aim was old one-shot when he was a boy? Why, down landing when he was coming in, if he shot 15 times and hit 14 doves, he complained about wasting ammunition." "He never said anything about that," Jem muttered. "Never said anything about it, did he?" "No, ma'am. You wonder why he never goes hunting now," I said. "Maybe I can tell you," said Miss Mundy. "If your father's anything, he's civilized in his heart. Marksmanship's a gift from God, a talent. Oh, you have to practice to make it perfect, but shooting's a different from playing the piano or the like. I think maybe he put his gun down. We realized that God had given him an unfair advantage over most living things. I guess he decided he wouldn't shoot until he had to, and he had to today." "Let's say he'd be proud of it," I said. "People in their right minds never take pride in their talents," said Miss Mowdy. We saw Zeebo drive up. He took a pitchfork from the back of the garbage truck and gently lifted Tim Johnson. He pitched the dog into the truck, then poured something from a gallon jug on around the spot where Tim fell. "Don't yell over for a while," he called. When we went home, I told Jem we really just want to talk about school on Monday. Jem turned to me. "Don't say anything about it, Scout," he said. "Why?" "I certainly am. Everybody's died of the deadliest shot in Macon County." Jem said, "I reckon if he wanted us to know about it, he'd have told us. If he was proud of it, he told us." "Maybe it slipped his mind," I said. "Nah, Scout. It's something you would understand. Atticus is real old. But I wouldn't care if he couldn't do anything. I wouldn't care if he couldn't do a blessed thing." Jumping up a rock and threw it jubilantly at the car house. Running after it, he called back, "Atticus is a gentleman. Just like me." And that is chapter 10. We have one more chapter to read. We'll do that on Thursday. Those people joining us a bit later, this is a pre-recorded class for ENG3C. It's being broadcast on Wednesday, March 4th. I am currently traveling in Keewaywin and Big Trout and am unavailable for calls or help right now. Should be back in Sioux Lookout probably around 5:30 or so today. And I will be back in the office on Thursday. So right now we're going to start looking at Lesson 10. And Lesson 10 is looking at a research report. So we're going to read about crime stories, specifically true crime stories. So in this lesson, you'll read a narrative non-fiction passage. Although it is in narrative form, the story is a depiction of true crime. Before you begin reading, consider whether or not you have any preconceived notions about what makes a killer. Do you have fixed ideas about what a killer may be like, or you're not sure, it can be something fluid? So we have a short story here called Twisted Sisters, definite preference for murder over love. And we have one here we're going to look at. We will also probably end up reading at least a second one, if not a third one. And these are by I believe it's a Canadian author, Max Haynes. So remember, this is non-fiction. It's written like a narrative, but all the facts and what happened is true. So it says, Marlene and Deborah Sims could not be described as your typical loving sisters. They displayed a definite preference for murder over love, particularly when it came to husbands. We'll start with Marlene. We'll get to Deborah soon enough. Marlene and Deborah moved to Gainesville, Florida in the early 1970s with their parents. A trailer park just outside the city limits was home to the family. When Marlene was only 14, she met Cecil Beatty, a 21-year-old good old boy who liked to drink and fight just to pass the time away. When Marlene informed Cecil she was pregnant, the young couple married. In the next 2 years, the Beattys would have 2 more sons. Then they agreed to disagree. A divorce quickly followed, and Marlene and Cecil remained in contact with each other. Folks around Gainesville say that Cecil continued to carry torch for Marlene long after they were separated. In 1984, Marlene, now 28, married construction worker Larry Foster. She never did forget that Cecil carried with her a $30,000 life insurance policy with her as a sole beneficiary. Let's move to Deborah. She too had endured an unsuccessful marriage, but like her sister, had rebounded. Deborah tied the knot for a second time. Her new hubby was a telephone installer, Joe Bannister. They proceeded to have 2 children, a boy and a girl. Deborah, the dominant personality of the 2 sisters, gave a lot of thought to getting rid of her husband, Joe. She also stressed her sister that she would most likely, if Cecil Beatty put it out of the way, leaving in that cool $30,000. One day, Deborah spotted a most interesting ad in Soldier of Fortune magazine. The ad offered a Vietnam veteran services for high-risk assignments. Deborah called the number in the ad and spoke to a man with the great name of John Wayne Hearn. She and John set up a meeting in a restaurant. They took an instant liking to each other. John, who had been married 4 times himself, fell hard for Deborah. When Deborah gingerly suggested he wanted her sister's ex-husband dead, John agreed to do the job. They settled on a price of $10,000 for the hit. Deborah talked the deal over with Marlene. Thought the idea of killing Cecil was a capital suggestion. There is one little problem, or better still, 10,000 little problems. How to raise the money. The sisters come up with the plan. Marlene and Deborah had their grandmother's house insured against fire. Grandma, who lived in Santa Rosa Beach, hadn't left her home in 50 years. Somehow the sisters enticed her to visit Gainesville for Thanksgiving 1984. According to the police, the girls brought the grandma to Gainesville, drove the 5 hours back to Santa Rosa Beach, and torched the elderly lady's house. Voila! Insurance money. Enough to pay the hitman. After receiving his $10,000, John Wayne Hearn purchased a 12-gauge shotgun. On January 6, 1985, he walked up to the Beatty home and observed Cecil sleeping on a couch. John shot twice, killing Cecil instantly. Police informed Marlene of Cecil's untimely demise. She hardly blinked, informing investigators, "I'm glad the SOB is dead, but I didn't kill him." She'd be disappointed to learn Cecil had just recently removed her as a beneficiary for a $30,000 life insurance policy. With the biggest portion of their relationship completed, you might say that Deborah and John Wayne Hearn called it a day. After all, they had apparently put off the perfect murder. But such is not the case. Deborah and John Wayne, you may call them that, were truly in love. Bold as brass, he had moved closer to Gainesville to be closer to his true love. Deborah now felt she and her lover were operating above the law. They had gotten with one murder. Why not try for two? Life would be so much more simpler without her cumbersome husband Joe lurking in the wings. On February 2nd, 1985, John Wayne intercepted Joe in his pickup truck on a dark country road. He killed Joe with Joe's own weapon, an AR-7 survival rifle. When Deborah learned of the killing, she was inconsolable. John Wayne was a pillar of strength for Deborah at the funeral. He took photographs of the family party, took an active part in assisting the bereaved widow. In fact, John was so visible that some folks remembered him. He was the same fellow who showed up just before Cecil Beatty was murdered. Coincidence? Maybe. But suspicious enough for several citizens contacted the police. John Wayne was questioned. He told investigators that he'd been out of town visiting his mother in South Carolina on the day of the murder. His family told the police they had known their good friend John Wayne for years. You think John Wayne would cool it now the heat was on? Look at me further from the truth. He received another response to his ad on Soldier of Fortune. Seems like a Robert Black over in Bryan, Texas wanted his wife murdered. John Wayne agreed to his regular fee of $10,000. February 21st, John Wayne and Robert Black faked a robbery of the Black home. Black provided the hitman with his own .22 caliber revolver. He then called his wife at work. According to John Wayne, Robert inquired, "When are you coming home, honey?" John Wayne was waiting for Sandra Black. As she entered the dining room, he shot her in the head. He then bent over the fallen woman and shot her directly in the eye. While John Wayne was taking care of business in Texas, the police were investigating his alibi. His mother now admitted her son had not visited her since she had stayed earlier. Police were also able to trace phone bills disclosing calls made between Deborah's home and John Wayne's motel room. As the web of incriminating evidence tightened around him, John Wayne turned himself into police. Within hours, he confessed to killing Cecil Black, Joe Bannister, and Sandra Black. He also implicated Marlene and Deborah. He had good reason to make a deal. Florida and Texas had the death penalty, and John Wayne desperately wanted guarantees his life would be spared. In August 1986, Deborah Bannister stood trial for murder. Unfortunately, John Wayne, who was not the brightest of men, had installed a recording system in his mother's home. He was in a custody fight for his son by one of his four wives and had bugged the phone so it automatic tape every conversation. As a result, the prosecution was able to play a tape featuring him and Deborah planning her husband's murder. Deborah Bannister was convicted of second-degree murder and imprisoned and sentenced to 17 years imprisonment. In addition, she pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and received a 30-year sentence for this offense. Marley made a deal, pleading guilty to first-degree murder. She received a prison sentence of 5.5 years. R. Black was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. He's currently resides on death row. John Wayne Hearn was sentenced to life imprisonment, a sentence he's presently serving. So that is an example of a true crime account. So, what we're going to do, I want to show you a second one because these are interesting and a different type of writings, one we don't normally see. So we're going to go to Google, and we're just going to Google the author of this, which is Max Haynes. So you see stuff here. He was Canadian. And there's a bunch of different articles out here. So we're going to click on this one here. So we have different options here. So it's not what I was looking for. So we'll go here instead. Should be able to find here. So we'll do, these are all different ones. So we'll do this one, Stroke of Madness. Let's see what comes up with this one. So it's another one. It's another example. It's true crime. And it's a much older story. This is from same guy, but this murder itself happened in 1843. So Robert Dow was a retired apothecary, as the English called those who dispensed pills and potions before the turn of the century. Upon retirement, he took up residence in London. On Monday, August 28th, 1843, Robert drove into the tiny village of Cobham with his son Richard in tow. There are two things you should know about Richard. First, he was not rowing with both oars in the Aqua. His father realized Richard was extremely unstable. The elder boy just returned from the Mediterranean. From all reports available, the elder dad, Richard, had acted rashly and caused several disturbances. The concerned father had English doctors examine Richard. They agreed he was unstable and dangerous. In addition, Richard was an artist some renowned and promised. His paintings featured fairies drawn from his imagination. They were a commercial success and the subject of several exclusive shows. Robert Dad was deeply involved in his son's well-being. He stayed with Richard most of the time. On this day late in August, he was accompanying Richard on a short trip to Cobham to start a vacation, which he felt his son needed. Richard, knowing that his son was hallucinating, Richard believed he was receiving messages from the ancient Egyptian god Osiris. His hallucinatory state. He had come to regard his father as the man who calls himself my father. Unknown to Robert, his son was stalking him under the direction of Osiris. Dad swept the ship, a well-known watering hole in the village. Robert asked if they could provide beds for the night. John Adams, who knew Robert slightly, explained they didn't have any rooms because they had received so many requests for accommodations. They had a working arrangement with the locals living in the cottages close to the pub. They could provide one double bed. Before Robert could continue, Robert Dad said one double bed would just be fine. He introduced Adams to his son. Richard rather surely stated he wanted his own bed. Adams explained that there would be no trouble buying single beds. The two had to sleep in separate cottages. Richard agreed to these arrangements. Father and son had a beer and then went out for a walk to take in the pleasant summer evening. And early they returned and ordered supper. Richard Dad behaved somewhat erratically. At one point during his meal, he dashed into another area of the pub and gulped down 2 glasses of water when all the while he was a tumbler with water within arm's reach of his table. About 8:45 p.m., Robert and Richard went for another walk in the fading light. Near a gravel pit, they saw a large tree, the branches which almost touched the ground. Richard hit his father from behind. The blow to the head stunned the older man, who fell to the ground. Richard was on his father like a crazed animal, raining blows on his head and body. He pulled his half-conscious father under the branches of the tree, and then took up a straight razor out of his pocket and readily slashed his felpless victim. Because Robert's clothing was bunched up from being dragged in the bushes, the razor didn't inflict any real damage. Frustrated, Richard extracted a new large Siemens spring-bladed knife from his pocket. Well-directed blows with his firm weapon ended his father's life. In Richard's warped mind, he had killed Satan, who had been posing as his father. That evening, some villagers passed near the body. They paid scant attention, thinking it was someone who had had too much grog and was sleeping it off. The following morning, one of the villagers who had seen the still form from the night decided to investigate. It was he who raised the cry of bloody murder. Richard had the night's head start. He made his way to Dover, where he hired a small private boat to take him to France. From Calais, he traveled to Paris. Fellow passengers in the coach remembered him, the wild Englishman who had been their traveling companion. After a shopping binge for a new wardrobe in Paris, he booked passage on a stagecoach bound for Vienna, Austria. Before Richard left French soil, the god Osiris spoke to him once more. Osiris told him that Satan was a lone fellow traveler and sitting right beside him. Satan had been annihilated. Richard slashed viciously at the man's throat, but the attack was far different from the one taking place in the Zurich country road. The intended victim screamed, and the coachman quickly came to his rescue, pulling Richard away. Once overpowered, Richard settled down and was thrown to the authorities. We sent him to an asylum at Melun and later Clermont-Ferrand, where he stayed 10 months. Initially, the French were reluctant to allow Richard to be extradited, fearing an English court would execute an insane man. However, once they received assurances of English authorities he'd be certified insane, they agreed and sent him back. It's interesting to note that, despite numerous attacks on his father, Richard's family considered the gifted parent to be a sick person rather than a criminal. There's certainly an enlightened view from those times. Richard was sent to Bethlehem Royal Hospital, an insane asylum that was credited with giving him the word Bedlam. Many believe the master artist was lost world, but such is not to be the case. He transferred to Broadmoor, where the institution was opened. Here he painted digitally and produced some of his finest works, featuring fairies and fantasy scenes from his imagination. He died of natural causes in 1887 at the age of 70. In 1960, much of Richard's work was discovered by an archivist who had been left the old Bethlehem schoolhouse's records and files. Scholars studied the paintings and believed them to be the work of a genius. In 1974, the prestigious Tate Gallery in London held an exhibition of his works. Today, one of Richard's finest works, The Fairy Feller's Masterstroke, is permanently on display in the Tate Gallery. If you look closely enough at the extensive detailed suits of gnomes and elves, you'll find likeness of Robert Dad. Somewhere along the line, Osiris decreed that the image of Richard's murdered father would live forever in the work of his son. So as another example for this, so we're going to jump back to our unit now. And we have some support questions here. These questions deal with what we just read about in Twisted Sisters here, about the murder for hire. So, we'll work through these questions, and that's probably what we'll end for today. We'll pick up the rest tomorrow, or sorry, on Thursday. So, what's the nature of the crimes? What happened? Well, nature was murder for hire. They're paying a hitman to kill someone. There was also insurance fraud because they're trying to get money for the murder, as well as arson because they burned down the house to get the insurance money itself. So what kind of background did criminals have? consider back family, education, socioeconomic status, and wealth. Well, they were mainly lower class. They lived in a trailer park, didn't have very well-paying jobs, and both the girls had a fair number of children. They probably didn't get a whole lot of education because they moved around so much, and could have impacted on it all. Now, the murderer, actual killing, was a Vietnam vet. So he fought in the Vietnam War, which the U.S. fought from about 1965 or so to 1975. What motivated the crime? Well, simply no greed. They wanted the money, as well as they were unhappy in their marriages. So number 4 says, how did the media treat the case? Well, in this story, the media doesn't play a big role. They don't carry it a lot. They don't sensationalize it. They don't really publicize it a whole lot. However, the facts appear in newspaper. There was enough interest for the story to be aware of it because it was written in a newspaper. It's how Max Haynes picked up on it. Was justice served? Why or why not? Now, this is your own answer, your own thoughts and ideas. So, for the most part, justice probably was served. Everyone who did it went to jail. However, the person who did the actual killing didn't face death penalty. He only got life in prison. The 2 sisters who plotted the whole thing are probably now free because this was written. This happened in 1986, so they're probably close to being freed. And the other one, the Marlene, only got 5.5 years. However, the man who paid him to kill his wife got the death penalty in Texas, and he was executed in 1992. So that is. So we're going to do this. So we're going to look at writing a research report on Thursday. We'll do that, and we'll look at Chapter 11 in To Kill a Mockingbird, and hopefully we'll get all that done on Thursday. But we'll end there for now. Thanks to everyone who listened in to this makeup class. We will have class again on Thursday, tomorrow, at regular time, 3 to 4. Any questions? We'll have to be asked on Thursday, as I'm currently traveling. I should be getting a plane to come back from Keewaywin anytime. And if any other concerns, let me know. Other than that, I'll talk to everyone again on Thursday.